Benjamin Netanyahu is coming back. The former prime minister has a solid lead in Israel's election with more than 97% of the votes counted.
Netanyahu is waiting for all votes to be counted before declaring victory. Meanwhile, his opponent isn't willing to concede. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Netanyahu urged his supporters to wait until final results before declaring victory. Still, it seems clear that Netanyahu has a solid majority to form a right-wing government.
After the results came in, the celebrations began here at the Likud Party headquarters. And if the results hold, then Benjamin Netanyahu will add to his tenure as Israel's longest-serving prime minister.
If indeed the real election results reflect the exit polls, I will establish a national government that will see to all Israeli citizens without any exceptions.
Netanyahu's main rival, Prime Minister and Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid, also told supporters it's not over until the last vote is counted.
We have no intention of stopping. We have no intention of quitting. Every Israeli, religious or secular, left or right, Jew or Arab, straight or LGBTQ, we will continue to fight so that Israel will be a Jewish, democratic, liberal, and progressive.
Itamar Ben-Gvir, head of the religious Zionists, said his big rise was a public vote for a stronger Jewish identity in the country.
We want to make a total separation between those who are loyal to the state of Israel and those who undermine our dear country.
Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, says he believes Israelis want to live peacefully, and they see Netanyahu as a stronger leader than Lapid.
We will correct all the mistakes that Lapid made during the last year, whether it's in the economy, foreign relations. We have a lot to do. We will continue to work with our neighbors about the Abraham Accords, and we will bring security to the people of Israel.
CBN News political analyst John Wagi says there were a number of issues that concerned Israelis.
One thing for sure was security, and especially how it disintegrated over the last few weeks. Another thing is people just want to be done with elections. Yair Lapid's commitment to a two-state solution in front of the United Nations has an impact.
Polls showed that Netanyahu would just barely get to the 61 seats needed to form a coalition. But now we're hearing that could be as high as 65 seats. Gordon?
Strong showing. We've had years of election after election after election and governments that couldn't be stable, and to hear that he could have 65 seats, which would lock him in as prime minister. Why such a strong showing right now?
Well, it was kind of stunning to many people over here, Gordon, for weeks. You know, we've been talking about maybe 60, 61. I think, first of all, Gordon, Israelis turned out in huge numbers yesterday, the most since 1999. Many analysts say there was a choice that Israelis had to make. One was a biblical, nationalistic view of Israel and its sovereignty versus another more secular, progressive Israel and something more in line with European values of the European Union. Another reason, Gordon, was a lack of security that really touched a nerve. Many Israelis felt unsafe. They wanted more security, and they felt the current government by Yair Lapid didn't deal with the rise in terror inside Israel. And I think they also rejected the policy of a two-state solution. That's something Yair Lapid mentioned when he spoke to the United Nations. And also the government of Yair Lapid that depended on a party associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. And so another major factor, Gordon, is the stunning rise of the three religious parties that now have more seats combined than Likud itself. They have 34 seats at the latest count. In particular, it was the rise of the religious Zionist Party, and those policies are for more security and a greater Jewish identity, and this kind of policy resonated with a number of Israelis.
Well, why does Netanyahu appeal to those parties? He's secular. He's not part of any particular one of them. So why does he appeal so much to them?
Well, you know, throughout his tenure as prime minister, and particularly in the last 10 years, he's really depended on many of the religious parties. Even though Likud is not a religious party itself, this would be Shas, United Torah Judaism, religious Zionism, and really they have become part of a, elemental part of a coalition led by Likud, even though Netanyahu may not be as religious as they are. And so really that's what he depends on. Sometimes he's gone to the left or center left for his coalitions. But right now, it appears that Likud and these three other religious parties, they're going to have a solid majority in the next Knesset and really be able to implement the kind of policies they're advocating right now.
Well, walk us through the timeline of establishing a government. What happens next?
Well, right now, the day after, they're still counting. It's not official yet. And once the election is certified, probably in several days, and Israel's president, Yitzhak Herzog, he's going to sit down with all these political parties. He's going to ask them who they want to form the next government. And based on the results right now, it seems likely that's going to be Netanyahu and the Likud Party. Then Netanyahu and the Likud, they have 28 days to form a coalition. And that's what happens with many of these parties. They're going to sit down. They're going to negotiate who's going to get what ministry, what positions, sort of like horse trading right now. But it likely may not take 28 days because they're really a solid majority and they're really kind of walking in lockstep right now. So it will be likely when all this is going on that it'll take a couple of weeks for this government to be sworn in. And then Gordon, looking ahead to a Netanyahu government, he's already been clear that he wants to bring more Arab nations into the Abraham Accords. He's talked about trying to bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords. And also there's a Saudi peace plan out there that he's been talking about. And I would say that it'd be less likely that he's going to, unlike the Yair Lapid government, appease the EU and the Biden administration, and more likely to kind of stand up to the U.S. pressure for a two-state solution.
Well, let's talk about Iran. They're always sort of in the background and foreground. They've want to wipe Israel off the map. The Biden administration has now changed its tune. They're saying they're not going to waste time anymore on a nuclear deal. So how will this election affect both U.S. policy toward Iran and overall peace in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, I think any possible Netanyahu government will say, what took you so long to come to that conclusion that says, you're wasting your time with a nuclear deal with Iran? They've been consistently against, any sort of nuclear deal with Iran. Netanyahu, you remember, famously spoke against the first nuclear deal in Congress in 2015. So I think stopping Iran is going to be at the top of Netanyahu's foreign policy agenda. Now, the Biden administration, they have a tough place to be in right now. You have Iranians getting killed in the streets, crying out for regime change and for freedom. Iran supplying Russia with deadly drones. And so it's very tough for the United States to go sit down with Iran at this time. And I think that's something that the Netanyahu coalition, future coalition, would welcome.
Well, I hope it leads to further isolation of Iran, that they're the largest terrorist state in the world right now. And what they're doing, the U.S. should never, ever support. So it's an interesting day, and I didn't expect these kinds of results. So thank you, Chris, and thanks for the report.